Right. And I'm very pleased to have Janet Bannister here with us from Toronto and Roger Arjoon, I believe, here from New York. Also, we had the pleasure of having him at one of our conferences. So I'll quickly read the bios of my distinguished guests and before I let Roger take it away and do this interview with Janet. So, Janet is the managing partner of Real Ventures, um, one of Canada's largest early stage venture capital firms. Real is a leading source of capital for entrepreneurs who are building the next generation of leading tech companies. Janet has led investments in over dozens of companies and worked actively with founders to help them build large industry defining companies. As managing director, she sets the strategy for the firm, leads investor relationships, and oversees all firm operations. In addition, she's very active in the Canadian tech ecosystem. She's on the board of Communitech in Waterloo, Vector Institute in Toronto, and C100. She's also an active advisor to DMZ, Creative Destruction Lab, the research board of the University Health Network. In 2004, Janet launched Kijiji. Am I supposed to know how to pronounce that? Oh, no, I'm calling. Okay, it's very known, but for me, and I hope I said it right. And grew it to become one of the most visited websites in Canada. So I'm sorry, I'm not from Canada, so that's why I don't know how to pronounce it. But I guess I said it right. Janet also spent 4 years at eBay in Silicon Valley. You don't know, Janet, how much money I lost because of eBay, where she helped transform eBay from a collectibles to a mainstream marketplace. I got a huge collection of Star Wars that I started because of COVID. You have no idea. I don't tell my wife. They bring it from the back door. So anyway, Roger Arjoon, I'm having the pleasure of having with us again here. He spoke at our New York conference and one of the more experienced single family office executives out there. So Roger is an experienced single family office executive who up until recently was with HBI Group, the New York single family office of the UK-based Hinduja Family. It's a 30 billion international family conglomerate with global operation assets and platform companies across 10 industry segments, and which seeks to expand in the United States. Roger has spent his entire career in finance, having started with Lehman Brothers in the financial institution group, mergers and acquisition team in London. He was also a journalist M&A banker for UBS in New York, working across all sectors in the middle market space before switching to the buy side with our Capital Bank, a global private equity and asset management firm located in the Middle East. That's interesting, by the way. You know, we're doing our first UAE conference in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I'm not sure where in the Middle East, but we're working on a major event there this year. He was responsible for helping build out the private equity and growth capital arm of the emerging market team in Manassa before joining the $15 billion family office of the Hinduja Group at HBI. And today he's consulting families around the world. He will share with us all of that. So today, Roger will take it away and interview Janet and speak about the Canadian market, technology, and all of that. And I'll join you guys back later on when people will start to ask questions, and I'll be doing that part. So, Roger, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for that kind introduction. And morning, everyone, and welcome to DC Finance's webinar on early stage investment opportunities in Canada. I can't tell you that I'm personally very excited about this, the next hour when I'll be interviewing our distinguished guest speaker, Janet Bannister from Real Ventures Canada. In particular, at a personal level, we had started to look at venture capital as an asset class the last few years. And as I delved into this space, Canada became more and more on our horizon, not known as obviously a dominant geography, having been based in the US. So as I began to learn more about Canada as an attractive venture capital market, I began to have to spend a little bit more time in this space. So who else to learn from and to know than, hearing from probably one of the preeminent venture capitalists in the space right now. So I'm very excited at the opportunity to speak with Janet and Real Ventures today. Um, for those of you who need a little bit of background to Janet, I wanted to just give a little bit more color on her background in addition to what Danny has mentioned. Janet is a managing partner of Real Ventures Canada, which is about a 14-year-old company or firm in Canada, and which has raised over 300 million across 5 funds. They've had excellent returns, top quartile fund with net returns to investors of 25%. Their LPs include pension funds, corporates, as well as family offices. Their team is about 22 people, including 6 full-time partners based in both Montreal and Toronto. And they are now in the process of raising their next fund, which is a 150 million fund to invest in their promising Canadian venture capital space. Janet personally has invested in over a dozen companies and works actively with these companies, as well as being very active in the Canadian venture capital ecosystem, including being on the board of Vector Institute, which is an NGO dedicated to advancing Canada's world-leading AI research and innovation. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to the audience today, Janet Bannister. Janet, welcome.
Thank you so much, Roger, and hello to everybody. Great to be here with you today.
Terrific. Well, Janet, as I said, I'm very excited to get into it. I know we only have an hour, so I wanted to jump right into it. But a couple of things I wanted to cover are obviously your background, and to let people know exactly how experienced you are in this space. A little bit more about Real Ventures, the firm you're with, and one of the preeminent venture capitalist firms in Canada, as well as to talk about the overall Canada market, which I'm very excited about because that's what piqued my interest in Canada when I started to learn more about how competitive you were as an industry there. And then hopefully at the end we can leave about 5 or 10 minutes for questions from the audience, which I encourage to please ask throughout the next hour through the Q&A function, which you should have on your Zoom link. And Danny will kindly host the Q&A towards the end of this session. So without further ado, I wanted to first touch on, Janet, a little bit about your career, which is a fantastically successful one. So congratulations, first of all, on that. But as I was reading through it, I noticed that you basically started over 20 years ago from when you moved to Silicon Valley, and you started with this small company called eBay. So you've clearly been dedicated to this space for a very long time. But I've always been curious as I do these interviews with people, what motivates them to get into a particular space and how they've shaped their career over time. So my first question for you is how did you get that opportunity, and did you have a predetermined notion of getting into venture capital or eBay? Was it more circumstance or design?
Great. Well, thank you very much, Roger. So just a little bit about sort of my background is I actually started my first entrepreneurial venture when I was 14 years old. And it was a muffin business selling muffins that I had made up and down stores on Yonge Street in Toronto. Then I ran businesses through high school and university. After graduating from university where I studied business, I joined Procter & Gamble, worked in brand management there for about 4 years, then spent about 4 years at McKinsey. And after that, I decided that I did want to tap.
And this was McKinsey in Canada?
Yeah, exactly. It was McKinsey in Canada, but I was doing projects for McKinsey all around the world. And I decided that I wanted to give back to my entrepreneurial roots and join a fast-growing startup company. And I decided that I really didn't know a whole lot about technology. And of course, this was late 1990s. And I thought, okay, Janet, you got to get into technology now, because there's no better time. And if you don't get into it now, the sort of the window of opportunity for you to learn more about technology is going to pass you by. So I got this idea that what I wanted to do was move to Silicon Valley and join a rapidly growing tech company. Now, the problem was I really didn't have a technology background. I knew nobody in Silicon Valley, and I had no work visa or anything like that to enable me to work in the US. But I thought, well, that's not going to stop me. So I thought the best way to go about this would be to reach out to some venture capitalists who would have access to a lot of different startup companies. So I went online and I did some research, and I found a list of the top 10 venture capital firms in Silicon Valley. And I looked at all the different partners, and one of the firms on the list was a firm called Benchmark. And there was a guy there named Bob Cagle, and his background was in consumer packaged goods and marketing. And I thought, aha, this is my guy. He's going to relate to me, and maybe he will see some good in me and see how, where I could work in maybe one of his portfolio companies. And so I phoned him up and left him a message, and of course he didn't respond. And so I emailed him a few days later, and he didn't respond. So I phoned him a few days later, and this goes on for a couple of weeks. And finally his assistant calls me back and says, Janet, Bob has got all your messages. He has nothing for you. But I got chatting with her, and I was like, oh yeah, but let me tell you a little bit about my background, and here's why I think, I would be good at one of his companies. And she said, I tell you what, Janet, next time you're in Silicon Valley, you let me know, and I'll get you half an hour on Bob's calendar. So I said, okay, great. So the next week I called her up and I said, hey, I'm going to be in Silicon Valley next week. Do you think I could schedule a meeting with Bob? So anyways, I went and met with him. It turned out, I didn't know this before I started my telephone calling him and emailing him, that he was actually quite a legend in Silicon Valley. And amongst other things, he had put the original money into eBay. So I went and I met with him and we hit it off, and he said, Janet, you got to join eBay. And long story short, the next day he introduced me to Meg Whitman, who was the CEO of eBay. And a couple of weeks later, I had moved out to the Valley and had joined eBay. And at that time, eBay was primarily a collectible site. So, coins, stamps, things like that. And I was responsible for the non-collectibles category, which, as I said, was only about 10 or 20% of the business, and really helping to move eBay into more of a mainstream marketplace and driving the growth of those categories like clothing, home and garden, jewelry, books, etc., which today account for about 90% of the things bought and sold on eBay. So it was a great experience, and learned a ton by being there at that time.
Well, thank you. That's a fascinating story, and a wonderful example of perseverance. And especially for all the the younger people out there who can use this as a positive example, or use a role model of how to persevere to get exactly what you want. So congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks.
If it were me, they would probably rejected me about 4 calls ago, but I'm sure you did wonderfully well to blow them away, and that I'm sure was the platform for much of your success moving forward.
Thank you, Roger.
But after you left eBay, I understand you moved back to Canada to start Kijiji, which is one of Canada's most visited websites. Could you tell us a little bit about your transition away from eBay, by then a corporate structure, I'm guessing, to what I would believe to be more of an entrepreneurial venture?
Yes. So after about 4 years at eBay in Silicon Valley, my husband, who's from Toronto, and I decided that we wanted to move back to Canada to be closer to family. And so I went to eBay and I said, hey, I'd like to move back to Canada. And of course they said, well, that's fine, we'll support you. But the only opportunity that they had was head of product. So basically responsible for the ebay.ca website, which was a big step down. But I thought, well, you know what, I'll take that opportunity and I'll move back to Canada and I'll figure out what I'm going to do once I get there. So I moved back to Canada, And the first thing I did was I benchmarked how is Canada doing versus every other country in the world on eBay. And what I saw was that in Canada, eBay was doing a great job of getting people to the site. However, the propensity of those people once they arrived on the site to actually do anything, so to either bid on an item, buy an item, or list an item, that conversion rate was half in Canada, was half that of every other country around the world. So I thought, okay, this is interesting. And so I started to do some things on the site to try to address that, and simultaneously looked into, other factors to really understand the Canadian market. And what I learned was that Canadians spent a ton of time online, researched online, but preferred to transact offline. So I thought, okay, given that sort of more macro dynamic, I'm not sure that we are going to dramatically change that in the next couple of years. So is there a different model that would work better in Canada? And so then I started doing research, came up with 4 or 5 different potential ideas, narrowed it down, and I thought we should be launching a classifieds business in Canada. So similar to Craigslist in the US, like a classifieds model, because that way Canadians are researching online, transacting in person. So I went to some of the executives that I knew in Silicon Valley, and I said, hey, here's all the data. Here's why I think this would be a good idea. And they said, okay, that's interesting, Janet, but yeah, not sure. Like, Canada's not really a priority, not sure about that. But I was determined and I had this idea. And so I did some more research, and over time, and what I realized was that eBay was getting ready to launch a classified site in Europe. So I went back to the executives and I said, hey guys, you are launching it in Europe, like just let me take the platform and launch it in Canada. Again, they were very resistant, but I was like, come on, just like, I can do this. I can do it. Like, I don't need much money. I can just take the platform, localize it for Canada. And so finally they said, okay, Janet, you can do that. So we launched Kijiji, which, by the way, means village in Swahili, for everybody who's wondering. We launched it in Canada. Within a few years, it was one of the most visited sites in Canada. I then, started running the global Kijiji business, which was amazing. And it was a great experience. And I was, just a great experience to be able to grow that business and then to have the opportunity to run a global business as well.
Wonderful. I mean, congrats on that success at that stage of your career. So as I trace through your career and I see the arc of it, I think that brings us to where you are now, Real Ventures. I understand you got a call from them with regard to joining their platform. Given your successes both at eBay and Kijiji, now you're running this global platform in Canada from scratch. Based on where you're on your career at that point, which I think was 2014, could you tell us a little bit about, taking that call from Real Ventures? Why then? Why them? And where were you as you were thinking about your career at that point in time?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually the CEO of a venture-backed company at that time. And I got a call from Real Ventures that was at that time based in Montreal, and they were looking to hire a partner in Toronto. And so they contacted me, and I had never really thought about going into venture capital. But when I started talking to them and started really understanding the venture capital space and the venture capital industry a little bit better, I thought, you know what, this would actually be a lot of fun and a great fit for my background. Because basically what it does is it combines sort of my management consulting experience in terms of that strategic thinking, as well as my love for entrepreneurship and technology. And so, as you say, I joined in 2014, about 7 years ago. I was the first partner that they hired in Toronto and was responsible for building out their presence in Toronto and Waterloo. And then a year and a half ago, I was asked, so the original Real Ventures was founded by 3 guys in Montreal. And so as I said, a year and a half ago, I was asked to step up and be the managing director. And so I am now leading the whole firm, which again, lots of fun and keeps me busy.
Well, look, your career has clearly been one of continued success and continuing to move up the corporate ladder. So congrats again on that. Speaking of Real Ventures as a platform now, I think this is a great segue into the firm you're at, that you currently lead and that you have been with for the last 7 years. Could you tell us a little bit more about Real Ventures in a bit more detail with regards to its history and where are you now?
Absolutely, I'd be delighted to do that. So I actually have a couple slides. So I will just share my screen here. And maybe Roger, if you can just go on mute so that we don't have as much of an echo. I know sometimes we get a bit of an echo on this line, so I apologize for that. So I'm just going to share my screen here and help walk everybody through a couple of slides. So I assume that shows okay.
So we can see it. Yep.
Okay, great. So we're Real Ventures, Canada's venture capital firm. We are currently raising a $150 million fund. And so just to talk a little bit about the history of Real Ventures and weave in a little bit about the Canadian tech ecosystem as well. So in 2007, we questioned why brilliant Canadian founders needed to move to San Francisco in order to raise seed capital. And that was absolutely the case in 2007, where the best entrepreneurs who wanted to raise venture capital money and build a tech company, they were moving to Silicon Valley. And as we looked at it, the answer was more than money. It was about the networks and the ecosystem. And the early founders of Real Ventures realized that as a venture capital firm, we could play a pivotal role in building the networks and the ecosystem that are needed to enable an ecosystem to thrive. And so we got busy. We built mentor networks. We held founder events. We founded a world-class accelerator, which continues to run today and is now just completed its 13th cohort in the past 10 years, and developed startup resources. Now, fast forward today, 14 years later, we have witnessed Canada's transformation. We as Real Ventures have invested over the past 14 years in 250 companies. We have 750 portfolio founders, and we've raised over $325 million. And now what we're seeing is the best VCs from around the world are competing to get into Canada's industry-defining companies. And I'll just show one more slide that I think really sort of helps to talk about Real Ventures, who we are and where we've come from. You can see on the right-hand side our fund growth from $5 million in 2007 to $180 million in 2017. Our team, we have 6 full-time investment partners, including myself and a team of 20 people. Together across the entire team, we have 80 years of VC experience and 50 years of operating experience. We have lived and worked in Silicon Valley, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, and really bring that global DNA to our companies. We have a very diverse skill set and backgrounds, and we are passionate about seed. The other thing to note is that in terms of our investors, family offices have been strong investors in our fund since the beginning, including family offices with well over $1 billion in assets. And for them, they really appreciate not just the returns and the diversification that they get from investing in Real Ventures, but also the non-tangible assets of being involved in one of the leading seed stage venture capital firms in one of the fastest growing markets. And Roger, if you want, I can go on and talk about our returns, or I'll let you take it where we want to go.
If you can start before we get there, and I did mention the returns at the top, but feel free to go into a little bit more detail. I mean, I think it's obviously spectacular that you guys have been able to return above 25% net. This is net back to investors. So you're obviously hitting the cover of the ball. Congrats on that. But if you can just pull back a bit and just talk a little bit about your investment strategy and how unique or different it is, and also what differentiates you in terms of your value proposition. As there are many VC firms out there. Obviously, you're one of the best. Obviously, your returns have been superior. But what differentiates you from the next VC firm there? Why are you different? Why Real? What's special about you, both from an investing strategy as well as a value proposition?
Absolutely, that's great. And by the way, just to clarify, when Roger talks about 25%, that's net IRR, so annualized returns.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, so I will just go on to sort of this slide, which talks a little bit about our strategy. So in a nutshell, what we do is we invest in seed stage rounds of Canadian-based companies. So we are primarily investing, as I said, in Canadian-based companies, not exclusively, but about 80% of our dollars are invested in Canadian-based companies. And we get sort of 10 to 15% stake at the seed stage. And so, you know, I've got a slide here and I'll talk a little bit about it. We capitalize on an arbitrage that exists, as we find that US investors will not invest in Canada before the Series A. So what we do is, you know, as I said, Canada is an awesome tech market, and we'll get into that a little bit later. We invest at the seed stage level, and what we find is that at the seed stage level in Canada, if you were to take a company in, let's say, Toronto, and compare that to the exact same company with the same team under the same conditions in Silicon Valley, that company in Silicon Valley would raise at 1.5 to 2x the valuation. So there is an arbitrage opportunity. And the reason that arbitrage opportunity exists is because seed is still a local game. And so seed investors tend to be local. And the reason for that is that both from a founder and founders want to connect at early stage, at the seed stage. It's really important that they connect into the local ecosystem, that they get to hire the local talent. And as Real Ventures, we understand the Canadian market well, and we are very well connected into these early stage founders. The US investors tend to come in at the Series A, but not before. And so we can take advantage of that arbitrage that exists. And so, you know, as you say here, we take significant stakes in the best seed stage companies, up to 15% ownership. We apply our proven methodologies of developing these companies. So we do, as I said, you know, when the companies, we help our companies raise a Series A, at which point we will typically do our pro rata, as well as invest in the Series B. But we are really working with the best US VCs who will come in and lead the Series A's.
Got it. And I mean, we'll get to Canada as a geography, which is the most exciting part for me. But if I were to summarize, can I say it a little bit differently? And would this statement be correct? Relatively speaking to the US, especially at the early stage part of the cycle, there is less capital chasing better investment opportunities, and therefore that arbitrage you mentioned would exist more in the Canadian market versus the US market. Would that be safe?
That is a better way of saying
okay.
it. Yes, exactly,
Okay.
Exactly right, Roger. And I think, so if you sort of the logic is, hey, again, we're going to get into it. Canada's a great market. We believe that early stage is the best stage to exist because, as you say, there's less capital chasing the deals. And then, you know, we cover Canada like nobody else because of our programs, which we can get into. Of all the Canadian companies that are raising a seed round, we see 80% of them because we have the largest team and some of the programs that we're doing. We see 80% of companies in Canada that are raising a seed round. And I can tell you our win rate is, you know, close to 100%. Almost every time we want to get into a company, we get into that company because of our reputation and how we work with founders.
To that point, Janet, can you talk a little bit about how you said 80, you see 80, how do you source these opportunities? Have you gotten to a size now where, you know, you wait for the phone to ring? Or what is your outreach program within the community to make sure you develop relationships with these entrepreneurs and obviously be able to then evaluate the right opportunities for Real Ventures?
Absolutely. So I have a slide on that. Thing, but by the way, just as I'm going by, here are some of the types of co-investors. that we invest in. So we've worked with over 250 co-investors. Here we go. But I think, talking to your point here about how do we cover Canada like nobody else? So first of all, stepping back from a strategic standpoint, we know that broad, exclusive access to the high potential early stage companies is the key to success. If you are a venture capital firm, your deal flow is one of the most important things. And so what do we do to ensure that we have superior deal flow, that we see, as many of the Canadian companies as we can? Hey, we have like I think the 4 key bullet points, which you can see on the right-hand side, is number 1, we have a 12-person investment team. So we have 6 partners and 6 others at the non-partner level. We really have a seat at every table. We have unparalleled engagement within the Canadian tech ecosystem. Part of this is because of our size, but it's also back to our history. I talked about how from the very beginning, we were very involved in building the ecosystem. And it's really accepted within the Canadian ecosystem that, hey, Real Ventures did more than any other venture capital firm to build the Canadian market. And we did it because we knew, hey, we need to have a fertile market if we're going to be fertile. But if you build an ecosystem, if you are building a community, by default, you end up at the center of that community, at the center of the ecosystem. And so, we are at the center. We are involved in the accelerators. We are involved in the universities. We are involved in the government programs. We see these founders. The second thing is Founder Fuel. I mentioned this earlier. This is an accelerator. It's a 3-month program where companies locate in the same offices as us, and we work with them very closely. We have a dedicated team that really leads this. Founder Fuel is the longest running accelerator in Canada. It has proven to be an absolute, secret sauce, one of the secret elements of, or maybe not so secret, of our success. The return on capital from these companies, we have a 6x multiple on invested capital that we invest in these companies. It has been a launch pad for companies such as Sonder, which actually, interestingly enough, went through Founder Fuel 6.5 years ago. It is going public via SPAC this July at a $2.3 billion valuation. You have other companies there, several of which are on a similar pathway. The next thing we do to get even earlier is we have Front Row Ventures, which is a university-focused program. This program, we have 55 students, it's a 55-student team. Over the summer, we are training. So right now, we are training these students in the core elements of VC. And then in the fall, they will go out to 20 campuses in Canada, where they will seek out the best entrepreneurial ideas that are coming out of those universities. Most of those deals are deep tech, most advanced AI that is coming out of the campuses. And so we are investing in those companies. So From Real Ventures as a whole, it writes $25,000 checks into these companies. And then we see those companies and we double down and we invest. We have invested in 3 or 4 of those companies at the seed stage, led their seed stage round, because we get to know those companies as early as possible. And then several of them are going on to raise follow-on rounds. And then, as I said, we invest both at pre-seed and seed stage.
Got it. That's a very interesting approach and unique. So thank you for sharing that with us. It brings me to the question, of course, because you clearly have a large portfolio. Could you talk a little bit about some of your portfolio companies, the successful ones, and how you've gone through the process from sourcing to investing, execution, and exit if appropriate? But just 1 or 2 success stories, which everyone has, but I would love to hear what Real Ventures top 2 or 3 investments are.
Good. So I have a slide somewhere in here. Okay, so this is a little more than 2 or 3, but this is, and I'm not going to talk
in the interest of time, because I really want to move on to Canada, because
Okay.
I really think that's the meat
Okay.
of why everyone who is listening would be attracted to that
Okay.
geography.
Right.
There's no shortage of obviously opportunities for American investors here in the US, but to your earlier point of the supply-demand imbalance that Canada represents, I think there's an above average return option in Canada vis-a-vis the US, but we'll get to Canada in a bit. But
Okay,
if you can talk a little bit of portfolio companies, that'd be terrific.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'll talk about a couple. One is a company called Storant. This is a Toronto-based company, and we led their seed round. We got to know them through our networks. What Storant is doing is Storant has it's a chip company, a semiconductor company that is specially designed for the workloads that AI puts on the computing power. So we, as I said, we led their seed round. We put $750,000 into their seed round at a $4 million valuation. We have since put in.
What year was this?
2016. That company has just raised at a $1.2 billion valuation, led by Fidelity. We have put in more money throughout the way, but we are looking at a 32x on our invested capital to date. One of the interesting things about that company is Jim Keller joined the company about a year and a half ago. Jim Keller is one of the most respected architects in the processor industry. He is credited for being for key advances at Tesla, Apple, AMD, and Intel. So, I mean, that company, you know, as I said, they've just raised a 1.2 billion valuation. The next stop for them is most likely to IPO. We have big hopes in terms of where they're going. So that is, I mean, one example. Another company that you may have heard of is a company called Clearco. It used to be called Clear Bank. Again, we invested in their first round. They have just raised at a 2.3 billion valuation. We have a 47x return on that company. And what Clearco is doing is they are a lender to e-commerce and SaaS companies. They have lent over $2 billion to date. And what's really interesting about them, again, leveraging this AI that is so strong in Canada, is they have an AI engine that pulls in data from multiple sources and makes loan decisions in less than 20 minutes in terms of the amount and the terms of the loan. And they have loss ratios and return on capital much higher than a traditional bank. So those are two as an example, as a quick example. Of course, I love all our companies and could go on, but those are two to give you a flavor.
No, that's terrific. That's more, you know, look, congrats on those two in particular, first one 32 times, which, and it sounds like it may still be higher over time as it IPOs. So good on you for that. I wanted to move quickly to what I think is the meat of this, especially for me. You know, as I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we started to look, when we looked at venture capital as a asset class, Canada was on the periphery, but became more on our radar as we recognize a little bit of that supply-demand imbalance we spoke of. So would love to hear a little bit more about Canada. For those of you in the audience who don't know, I mean, Canada's VC industry is a lot longer and older than we would probably give it credit for, but it also has established success. The largest company in Canada now is actually Shopify, not one of the big financial institutions like Royal Bank of Canada or the other banks that you would suspect or naturally suspect. So it goes to show you a classic success story. It's an over $200 billion market cap company now. So first question, Janet, why Canada?
Okay, so I got a slide for that one too. So I will just share my screen here. So Canada is recognized as one of the best startup markets in the world. I think there's three key factors to know about Canada. One is their deep pool of talent. Second is the access to global markets. And the third is the flywheel of Canadian success. And I'll talk about each of those in turn. First of all, in terms of the deep pool of tech and entrepreneurial talent, Canada has world-class AI. And you might say, hey, why is Canada, you know, as you mentioned, Roger, Canada is known globally, internationally for its AI. Why AI? Well, the what they're often called the founding fathers of deep learning, all studied in Canada. Joshua Bengio, who continues to work in Canada and teach at the University of Montreal, Jeff Hinton, who studied and teaches at the University of Toronto, and Jan LeCun, who is now in New York and working for Facebook. But Jeff, those three people recently won the Turing Award for the advances that they made, and they all studied in Canada and have lots of, therefore the students that are coming from Canada. As well, we're seeing massive investments from the government in terms of that. And the third point in terms of our talent is we have not only this homegrown talent, but also immigrant-friendly talent. And this is something that the government has really doubled down on over the past 5 years. And why is this important? If you look at the US, 50% of the largest tech companies were founded by first generation immigrants. 57% of the STEM workers in Silicon Valley were born outside the US. And Canada is now becoming a desired landing spot for this international talent. And in fact, what the Canadian government launched about 4 years ago was a 2-week visa policy so that tech startups can get top international talent into the country with a visa in less than 2 weeks. And so again, we're seeing huge inflow from that. The other thing is the easy access to global markets. Canadian companies are thinking globally from day one because Canada is a relatively small market, which means that companies are forced to think globally, which helps them in the long run. And they've got the US market right next door. And then finally, it's just the flywheel of Canadian success. We are seeing, rapid increase in success. If you look at the largest 25 tech exits ever in Canadian history, 10 of those have happened in the last 5 quarters. Yeah, it's updated here. It said 9, but I've updated this. This is new information. And if you look at Real Ventures, for instance, of our 2017 fund, 70% of our founders are repeat founders.
Sorry, say that last one again.
Our 2017 seed fund, 70% of our founders are repeat founders. So that just speaks to the maturation of the Canadian ecosystem.
Well, one of the things I think you mentioned earlier, and I know here in the US we suffer from because of our H-1B restrictive policies, is that a lot of very good talent, and this is widely known because of retaining that talent, especially the skilled labor. Students who come over here and try to stay on, especially in STEM. Our immigration policy isn't as generous as Canada, especially on a per capita basis. So I think you're sopping up a lot of the talent that would ordinarily come here, but you're benefiting from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you set the stage of why Canada is that attractive market for the reasons you just expressed. Can you give us a real life example of, for example, one of your portfolio companies that may have benefited from this environment you just described?
Yeah, absolutely. So, see, I could talk about, so one of our portfolio companies is a company called Canvas. It is an AI platform for the industrial operations. So it's AI turnkey operation. They go into factories, they analyze the data and identify ways within 2 weeks in terms of how the companies can improve the efficiency of their operations. So again, speaking to this exact point, the engineering team, they have come from University of Toronto and Waterloo, strong Canadian universities, but they have engineers on their team from India, China, and Singapore. But they are basing their sales team in San Francisco so that they can access the US market more easily by actually placing their team there. And by the way, I have this point, the reasonable cost. Again, another data point. There have been studies done that say, hey, if you compare a company operating in Toronto with a like-to-like company operating in San Francisco, again, same level of talent, same everything, the cost of operating that team in Toronto will be 1/2 of the cost of operating that company in San Francisco. Again, due to the cost of labor. Next thing is easy access to global markets. This company's very first customer was in Europe. Today, they're selling to customers in Middle East, Asia, Europe, and US. And in terms of accessing the capital, this is another case study where Real Ventures led the seed round. They have subsequently raised money from Gradient, which is Google's AI dedicated fund, and Yamaha Ventures.
Terrific. A wonderful example that proves your point. So moving on, sorry, I just took a look at the time. I know we're running short of time. I have a ton of other questions that I would really love to ask, but I need to be selective, and I definitely want to get to the Q&A where participants can ask questions that are important to them. But my last one on this is, could you talk a little bit about the AI sector within Canada? It's a large part. I probably core competence. I'm not sure if that's the appropriate word to use, but within Canada, it's a big part of the VC world. So if you can talk a little bit about AI within Canada as a subsegment of technology there.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I mean, AI is very strong, or Canadians are very strong in AI. And I think to that point, you know, it's interesting, and I think this also ties into the immigration point, but if you look at some of the companies that have opened AI-focused offices in Canada in the last 3 years, I think that this is a testament to Canada's talent. So Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Uber, Twitter, and Amazon.
And these are all AI-specific platforms, not just offices there, just to be clear.
All of them are opening AI. Every single one of those companies opened within the past 2 or 3 years an AI dedicated research office in Canada. I mean, that just gives you an idea. I mean, we can talk about the companies that are coming out of Canada, but I think when you have that credibility in terms of where are the largest tech companies looking for talent, I think that is a huge sign. And
they obviously represent a wonderful exit option for you.
Exactly. Yeah.
For your portfolio companies. So it's a win-win for both sides, I'm sure.
Yes.
Okay. Moving on quickly, Janet, because I definitely want to get to some Q&A and Danny. But just to wrap up quickly, at least this section of it, what should people do if they want to, if they're interested in learning more about Real, your next fund, and you as a person, what should people take away from this, especially for next steps?
Okay, so first of all, if we are raising our fund, if you are interested in learning more, obviously no obligation, I would be more than delighted to schedule a call with anybody. I believe that Denny will be sending out in the next day both a link to this recording as well as my email, but I'll give it to you right now. It's Janet, so Janet, @realventures.com.
Thank you for that. As Janet mentioned, I think Danny will be sending out an email with much of her contact information. So for any of those listening who would like to get more information, it should be there in an email in the next 24 hours. At this point, I'd like to turn to Danny to see if there are any questions that came in on the Q&A forum that would be appropriate to ask at this time.
Yeah, hey, thank you very much for that so far. So, yeah, we actually do have questions here. And yes, we will send everybody the contact information later on. And this is being recorded. So those of you who couldn't make it today, but don't know they couldn't make it today, can watch it later. And those of you that could make it today, just want to watch it again, you'll be able to do that tomorrow. So anyway, let's start with a couple of questions here. Specific to Canada, how has seed performed relative to later stage VC firms?
So I don't, I actually honestly have not seen the data. I'm not sure that the data is strong enough, is large enough. Most of the later stage venture capital firms in Canada are investing across North America. And so I have not seen that data specifically. Like, I just don't think the base is not large enough. I haven't seen it on PitchBook or something like that.
Of all the companies you have seeded, what percentage ultimately have gone the distance and become public companies? Did most go public in Canada or in the US?
Yes, so it is still early days for us to answer that question, just because, I mean, as I said, we started 14 years ago, and most of our investing has happened within the past 10 years, and it typically takes about 10 plus years for a company to go public. I will tell you, as a leading indicator, one of the things we look for, as I said, it's very leading, but what percentage of our companies get to Series A, right? That's sort of the first step. And an interesting statistic on that is 64% of the companies that we invest in the seed round make it to Series A. In the US, the number is 45%. So again, it's not, that's not, hey, going all the way. But I will say, and I'll wrap in here, a question that I saw later on is about the ambition of Canadian founders. An interesting change has happened in Canada over the last, I'll call it 6 or 7 years, where Canadian founders are now determined to build a multi-billion-dollar public company. And one of the biggest things that has changed that has been the growth of Shopify. Roger mentioned Shopify. For those of you who don't know Shopify, it was started in Ottawa. It is a proudly Canadian company with the vast majority of their people still in Canada, although they do have international offices. Shopify is now valued at close to $190 billion, the highest valued company in Canada, with, as Roger said, market cap higher than the Royal Bank of Canada. That has changed. So many people know folks at Shopify. That has changed the mentality. And there are other companies that are coming along that are going public. I talked about the exits. And Canadian founders right now, they are not looking to sell out for $100 or $200 million so that they can retire and go and buy a nice cottage or something. They are looking to have a world-leading, impactful company. And the founders that we are talking to, both at the early stage right on through, they are saying, we're taking this company public. We are building a company that will survive generations.
Just one comment on that. I like the statistic you gave about early stage going to A, but I may be not misunderstanding the question, but clearly, in addition to IPO exits, there are clearly strategic acquisition exits that you have that are going to be very successful.
Yes.
So if the question had to be with, from these early stages to public companies as a successful exit, you obviously will have many successful exits being acquired by other companies.
Yes.
Pre-IPO.
Yes, we will. We will have a lot of, and again, if you look at the data across North America, most of the exits are via acquisitions and
Correct.
not via IPO.
Correct. Yes.
But at the same time, we want our founders to be thinking big and to go in all the way and not selling out early. And that is what we are seeing.
Can you give us an idea of the dispersion of your returns across your portfolio companies? How many companies are successful? How many die? How many are zombies? What happens to the zombies?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So in terms of, I guess if you look at, 64% of our seed stage companies raise a Series A. So therefore, the 36% are not, they don't even go on to raise a Series A. And then, it does fall off. Now that question in terms of the dispersion, it changes a lot whether you look at percentage of companies or percentage of dollars. Luckily, we have a lot fewer, right? So luckily we're doing right. So that most of our dollars are, the dollars number and the percent company number is very different. So for instance, if 36% of our companies don't make it past Series A, it's not 36% of our dollars. We have, of the fund, 2/3 of the fund is reserved for follow-on, by the way, so that we can double down on the winners. In terms of that question, certainly we could go into it, more details offline. What we try to do though is I think the key is that there is, obviously there's companies that are falling off at every level. And what we do is make sure that we have the money, that we are focusing on the winners and doubling down on the winners and not putting money against the companies that aren't going to make it.
Israeli founding entrepreneurs have often been said to sell out too early. Oh, I think you mentioned that. Rather than growing their companies into multi-billion-dollar companies, we talked about that. The Canadian founders are changing their attitude there. Canada has benefited from the Trump administration's tightening of the immigration to the US. The Biden administration is opening up immigration substantially. Will that have a negative impact on Canada's ability to attract the most educated and entrepreneurial immigrants?
So it's a great question. We do think about that a lot. I think that in May, although I will say that a lot of the immigrants are coming to Canada, not just because they can, but they perceive the quality of life and the atmosphere attractive. So we will definitely see how that plays out. But from what we hear directly from our companies and from the people that we know that are coming to Canada, Canada still retains a benefit in terms of how they feel welcomed into the country and the atmosphere. So again, this is definitely not to bash the US. The US is an awesome company. I've had the pleasure of living there for 4 or 5 years. And it's more, Canada, where we're thinking about, hey, how can we benefit as investors? And frankly, how can you as US investors diversify your asset base?
What percentage of your companies become EBITDA positive, and how long does it generally take to do so? Do seed stage investors need to expect to fund the burn rate in follow-on financing?
So that, I will say in short, it depends. Some of our companies do go EBITDA positive. The rare companies, right? But some will, depending upon their model, will go EBITDA positive. We have one company, frankly, I'll give you a specific example, where we led the seed round in, I think it was 2010 or 2011. They have never raised another round. They continue to grow in a cash flow positive way. We have another company that I can think of that I'm on the board of that we invested in 2012, and they run that business. They are growing and they are cash flow positive. There are other companies, particularly, for instance, in the deep tech space, where I mentioned like a quantum computing company. Obviously, they're raising a lot of capital before they are going to generate any revenue. We are always looking with our companies in terms of what would it take if the market suddenly went bad to get you guys to cash flow positive. And I think, again, this is a different mentality in Canada than in the US, where it's like, hey, yeah, you probably, if you have a proven business model where the unit economics make sense, then it's most likely the right thing to do if you can access capital to invest that capital to accelerate the growth of your business. However, we always need to be mindful of saying, hey, first of all, make sure if you're spending the money if you're ramping up spend, that you know what you're going to get for that additional spend, and you're being very cautious and careful around, as I said, the return on every dollar that you're investing. And secondly, should the bottom fall out of the markets, what is your game plan? How can you scale back your expenses very quickly so that you can become cash flow positive, or at least not need to raise any more money in that scenario?
Are there any areas of tech you simply will not touch?
So there's, we do not do biotech. So I don't know if that's considered, but any sort of like drug discovery, we do not do that. We also have, so that's a sort of one big area. The other big area is anything around gambling, tobacco, drugs. So we have an agreement with our LPs in terms of those sorts of considerations, that we will not invest in any industries, as I said, involved in gambling or, those sorts of products. But that's about it.
Blockchain?
Yeah, oh yeah, we're in blockchain companies, cryptocurrency. So as I said, so the question, yeah, so we do not invest in biotech. So where we draw the line typically is that when we do invest in fintech companies, I'm just reading this, in terms of the biotech medical devices, we do not invest in things that have to be regulated, but we are very active in what I would call digital health or health tech. So these are everything from, we have a company called Swift Medical, which is using AI to diagnose wounds and wound care. We are in a company called League, which is in the employee health benefits and wellness space. So we do have definitely companies like that.
You've spoken a lot about AI. Do you invest in biotech? You just said no. And medical devices. What about plant-based food, recycling companies, fintech companies, etc.?
Yeah, so we would look at all of those, as long as there is some tech to the company.
Okay. Do you invest in companies which have technologies for satellites and other outer space?
So we have not invested directly into any satellite or outer space companies. We do have companies that could use the technology in that space. So thinking in terms of some of our processor companies, but it's not directly, although we could look at that. I think a big question would be the exit timing.
I was just about to ask, is there any other question that can still be asked about what you don't invest in? But apparently there is. So you're being asked if you invest in Israeli startups as well, in the Israeli tech space.
So, we haven't, but we would definitely be open to it. So if you have any great ideas, feel free to send them my way.
Great. I think that's about it. Somebody mentions here, everybody knows the story of how the board of Apple and Steve Jobs, Apple's founder, how many founders in your companies eventually step aside for professional managers? Do you have to encourage founders to do so?
So the answer is, I don't know the numbers, it's rare. Occasionally, our mentality is, we look for founders that we believe can scale the company, understanding that they will probably need to have other strong leaders around them, and we work with them. There have definitely been cases where founders have stepped down. However, typically it's not a firing like Steve Jobs. Typically in that case, it's where the founders understand and come to the realization through multiple discussions and coaching that they are not the best people to run the company. But if you look at most of the startup companies, that most of the technology companies that have done very well, they are still founder led, right? So think about, Facebook, Amazon, Google. Okay, Google's changed, but for a long time, those founders led the company. And you could give more examples, but typically it's that founder vision and founder drive that is needed for the company long term. Again, not 100%, and we're always, thinking about our options, but typically it's the founder of the most successful companies where the founder stays in, but the founder grows as an individual and surrounds him or herself with incredible people who can complement that founder.
And do you feel that you need to be a management consultant, psychiatrist, financial advisor, and all of the above to be successful as a seed stage investor?
Yeah, I'd say maybe all of the above and a lot more. Yes, I'd say all of the above and a lot more.
So I think that's about the questions. We've had so much from people here. I think that's about it. So is there anything else you'd like to mention at this point? Of course, again, tomorrow you'll be receiving the contact information and all of that. But otherwise, Janet or Roger, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Well, what I would like to say is just to thank you, Danny, for the platform, and most especially is to thank Janet. I was very excited to host this. As I said, I had a personal interest in Canada that continues, and it was a wonderful hour of information and learning not only about you as a background, but also real ventures, as well as Canada as an attractive investment geography. So I know this has been exceedingly insightful for many of the listeners of this webinar. So I really wanted to just express a great gratitude of thanks to you for taking the time to share with us your insights this morning.
Well, listen, thank you very much, Roger, for being here, and Danny, thank you for hosting us.
Roger, I would like you to host all of our upcoming events. We will send you the schedule shortly. We do 2 a week. And I finally want to mention, as some of you may know, guys, I see the remarks. Will you get the recording? Tomorrow, we have an automatic system here. We're not even in control. The machines have taken over, guys. We have no control. Tomorrow, exactly.
Probably one of Janet's portfolio companies.
Tomorrow, exactly at the same time of this our presentation, which is 11 EST, you will all receive an automatic email from the system with the contact information and the link to the recording. So I'll just finish this by saying that, the Canadian market has been one of our most exciting markets out there. As some of you may know, we have our main event in Toronto, where we also do the sub-conferences, which are we have the main family office conference at the Four Seasons, where Easy Sharp was the first speaker at our first event there, which was the founder of the Four Seasons. And we also held our two sub-conferences that we only hold in major cities, our tech event that we've held with Osler for family offices, and our real estate event that we held with Stikeman to the family office session. And of course, we were just about to do Montreal and Vancouver before COVID came, but we've learned recently that the Canadian market is actually, Canada is getting out of sooner than we thought of COVID. Interestingly enough, Montreal beat everybody. They were the first, and now Toronto just joined this weekend. I'm not sure about Vancouver. It's not the same time zone, so we can never call them and ask, but we will figure it out. I think that.
By the way, Danny, just listeners, Canada now has the highest first vaccination rate of any Western country.
Yeah.
I was looking at the stats this morning.
So I've heard. So what I wanted to say with all this is that this year we are holding not only our online Canadian conference that we held last year with the Fasken, Scotia, probably PwC and others, but in November we will be holding in-person conferences in both Toronto, Montreal, and I'm waiting to hear about Vancouver. They will be though hosted by these two destinations by Fasken. It's our way of being very flexible. So in case the government, for whatever reason, will not allow it, we can always be flexible enough and move it even at a 2-week notice. We think we'll be able to make this happen. So we are very, very excited, because up until a week ago, we were just planning to do our events in Canada in Q2. So that's going to be exciting. And I'm telling you, people are eager to meet. I think we can do a conference about Greek salad and we'll have a full house just the same. People are anxious to meet. I'm walking here in Rye on the beach. You should see what's going on. There's a band playing outdoors. People are standing as if this is something they've never seen before. We are all eager to meet one another. New York. I finally, Roger, I said it last week. First time in my life that I went to the subway and I saw the 5 train. I couldn't get on it because it was full, and I never thought I would be happy that I cannot get on a train and I need to wait for the next one, But that was the case, So so I'm happy about that. That life is slowly getting back to normal in our area here, and we will see you guys in person very, very shortly. So be prepared. I was just putting a post about our Canadian conferences just now. So thank you so much, Janet and Roger, and hope to see you all in person.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you, Danny.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Janet.
Okay, bye.
My pleasure. Take care. Bye-bye.